It is your Classic Metal Show right here on the ClassicMetalShow.com. That is something brand new, believe it or not, brand new from Impellitteri. The name of the new CD is called Venom, and that's called We Own the Night. And a guy who owns the guitar for the first time on the Classic Metal Show, I want to welcome guitar legend Chris Impellitteri. Welcome to the Classic Metal Show there, Chris.
Nearly, thank you so much for having me. Greatly appreciate it.
Well, Chris, I got to tell you, I've had your CDs for a lot of years, and you know, you rank up there among the guitar legends that you know, came from the greatest era in music, as far as I'm concerned, the '80s. And you know, you made your mark out there, being very proficient with your instrument. And of course, if anybody's followed your career for the last 30 years, they know you're known for your fast guitar playing, and I know that gets old after a while. I'm sure everybody asks you about, oh, you know, what's it like to be such a fast guitarist, you know, and that kind of a thing. And I'm sure that gets tired. So I'm going to start there, since I've never had you on the show.
Okay.
When you established yourself as one of the fastest shredders in the world, and were voted, you know, by various magazines as that fast shredder, at what point did it get old to where you were just like, okay, I've proven myself in the shredding part, now I want to create music that people will remember?
Day one.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. Listen, shredding, I think, can be a lot of fun. It can be very tolerable, and it can really help or take the level of or take the music to a new level if it's done correctly. But if it's overused, abused would be a better word, it can become very irritating.
Yeah.
So listen, I was always cognizant of that. You know, when I started playing guitar, I think a lot of people think I was trying to be fast to show off, or, you know, I was trying to, I don't know, maybe I was a little egotistical kid. And that was completely incorrect. You know, actually, when I was a child at 9 years old, and it's been many years, so it's easy to talk about now, but, you know, I lost both my mom and dad. They died when I was 9 years old, so I was kind of an orphan. And my grandparents raised me. And my grandmother, I was really lucky because they were really young. And so my grandparents raised me, and my grandmother knew that I needed an outlet for this frustration or this anger or whatever was going to come out of me, right? Because I was going to be probably pretty emotionally scarred or messed up. And so she bought me an electric guitar. And I started taking lessons, and I just found I was able to release that anger. I know this is crazy, but I was able to do that through the instrument. I was terribly shy, you know, and the instrument, I don't know, it was like this vehicle I could use to express myself.
Right.
And for some reason, I'd learn really complicated scales, you know, and eventually I'd get it really, you know, I don't know, I was able to play them with a lot of percussion, you know. And, you know, eventually I started working on my technique, and eventually I started going faster and faster, and that speed felt good. But it didn't mean that it was only the solos. It was also, you know, playing, you know, double kick, you know, music, really up-tempo stuff. And it just felt like a great release. And, you know, I remember early on when I started to master a lot of that, I was still taking lessons. I was classically trained. I remember a lot of teachers saying, well, wait a minute, careful. It's okay to play fast, but it has to complement the music. Otherwise, you're just wanking. And believe me, everybody, I've been accused a few times of being a senseless wanker.
Right.
But the reality is I always tried to think, well, if I'm playing fast, is it complementing the song, or is it hurting it, if that makes sense?
Right. I agree.
Yeah, and I've done it both ways. Believe me, I've done a lot of times. Fortunately, I've done it where I think it really has helped the song, and it just, you know, brings a smile on everybody's face when you do this crazy guitar solo they love. But there's other times when I listen back now to some of the older work, I go, oh, dude, you're just jerking off on the guitar.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Well, there's a band out there called Dragon Force. I'm sure you're familiar with them, or may have heard of them.
Yeah, actually, a guitar player called me the other day. I am me.
Yeah, and you know, the thing is that they made their reputation on how fast they can play the drums, how many beats in a second they can fit in. And, you know, a couple of songs, okay, I get it. But then you get a whole album of that. Then you get a second album of that. It gets real tiresome after a while.
I agree. I absolutely agree 100%.
Well, aside from being crowned the Shred King and all this and that, you know, you've you came up in an era where there are other notable guitarists. Obviously, there's comparisons to Yngwie Malmsteen and like a Vinnie Moore, people like that. And you're in good company there because these guys are all great in their own right. But being that you came, you kind of got into the public eye late in the 80s and then the 90s hit. What did you think, say right around 91, 92, 93, when the whole music landscape was changing? Did you feel like, where's a place for me? Or did you just look at it as a challenge? Or did you just, I don't know, direct your energies into something else? What was the early 90s into the late 90s for you as a guitarist and a musician?
Well, I think luck was on my side. I'll go to the beginning. This will hopefully answer the question properly. The very first Impellitteri record is literally called the Impellitteri Black EP. And we actually, did it. I think it was like 3 years before Metallica ever did the Black Album. And if you listen to the record, it's our first record. It's me, Rob Rock, a drummer named Lonnie Silva, and I think our bass player at that time was a guy named Ted Days. And it was like Iron Maiden on steroids, shredding, screaming. It was borderline thrash, but with melody, maybe more technical playing. And that was really the start of the band. And for some reason, it became this really big cult-followed EP, right? It was really big in Europe, Japan. As a matter of fact, I think it was Kerrang! Magazine who actually titled me. They said they called me the fastest guitar player in the world when they did a review on it. And by the way, that title is ridiculous. There's no fastest guitar player in the world. It's just not true. But regardless, in Japan, it blew up. I can't even explain it. It was huge. And so when I did my next record, Rob Rock had left the band, and I had to find someone. And it was going to be like a temporary project. So I bought a guy in the band named Graham Bonnet, who was a really well-known singer at that time. He had played for the band Rainbow and Alcatraz. Some of the younger people would not have a clue of who these bands are, but he was big. As a matter of fact, Rainbow, I think with him in the band, headlined what is now called the Download Festival, but back then it was, what was it called? Castle Donington.
Right.
And they had AC/DC open for them. Judas Priest opened. They were playing before Graham's band. So in Japan, he was huge. For some reason, because he had played with me on that Stand in Line record, we were just embraced. Almost not royalty, it's a horrible word. But, we were just...
You were held in high esteem.
Thank you. And so then what happens is we basically release our records. We do a little bit of stuff in the United States at the end of the 80s. I did we were on MTV. I was one of the guests on Headbangers Ball, all that stuff. And we were getting a lot of traction. Some people loved us, others hated us. And then comes in, bands like Nirvana, and things start to change. Well, here's where the blessing or the luck came in. Japan, all of a sudden, was like the only breeding ground it seemed like a lot of bands could survive in. They were the only ones that still had a big audience where, you could sell a lot of records and make money to survive. Where here, if you weren't playing grunge or wherever we were evolving to, these bands were dying.
Right.
And so during the early 90s and late 90s, I watched a lot of peers lose their careers. There was nowhere to turn. Japan, we ended up selling well over a couple million records.
Nice.
Covers of every rock magazine, playing arenas. Just unbelievable. It's like, why was that happening to us? I don't know, but it was. So we basically, it was almost as if that was our sanctuary, it was our island. It was like a gift from God. I swear. I swear. Sometimes I go, "How did this happen?"
Well, a couple of your contemporaries, like Mr. Big, was huge over there during that time period, and when Dokken reformed in '94, they were like the Beatles over there. And then of course your success over there. So what do you attribute to the Japanese having such a appetite for this style of music?
I'll be honest. I thought about this in detail, and I kind of stand by this. It's theory, not theorem. But I think Japan is a very well-educated culture, and everything that they're passionate about, they seem to research every facet. So a good example would be like if you studied classical music. They'd want to know everything about what town was Vivaldi born in, what city, what year, what were his parents, how did he play, how did he compose music. Did he play harmonic minor, diminished? What did he do as far as, whatever his mastery of concept and whatever led him to become this guy. And in Japan, because they were really into technique and playing based on education, I think when we went over there, especially with the first EP, it was getting to the point where guitar was becoming a competition sport, which was horrible, but it's true. It was getting that way. And with the Impellitteri Black EP, I was, at least the media, they were saying I was ridiculously fast and clean and all of that stuff. So they kind of started to explore me. Whether they liked it or not, I really don't know. But we did start selling a lot of records, and they started embracing me. All of a sudden, I was on the cover of the biggest guitar magazines, the rock magazines. I won their readers poll. And so something happened. And to this day, I think it's because, I was always pushing my human abilities to see how far I could, take the instrument, if that makes sense.
Right. Absolutely.
So, and because of that, for some reason, we were accepted. And that's all theory. I don't know if that's true or not. So that's part of it. And then I think also success by association. Like I said earlier about Graham Bonnet, like I said, Graham in Japan, he was a legend. We're talking like, almost like what teen stars are, right? Like pop stars. Right. Justin Bieber. He had that kind of effect on people. He was massive. Well, he joined Impellitteri. And just the fact that he had played with all these guitar heroes like Yngwie and Ritchie Blackmore and Michael Schenker and, Impellitteri, whether I was good or bad, I almost think didn't matter. They just immediately accepted me and embraced me and put me in that league with all those other guys. To be honest, I was a kid. I was going, man, do I deserve this? Well, I still think I have a lot more work to earn this, but whatever. And so I think that has a lot to do with it, to be honest.
Right. Absolutely. Well, you're going to put out your 10th release here called Venom, and you've got it's been almost 6 years since your last release, and what's been going on with you for the last 6 years? I know record sales are not what they used to be, and record deals are not what they used to be, and I know Frontiers Records has quite an affection for the hard melodic, what we call classic metal bands, and they put out a lot of them. So what was going on with you for the last 6 years? Did you look at the music business saying, why bother put out a record because it's just going to get downloaded anyway? Or was it just the record deal, or were you doing something else, or what was going
on? And I apologize. I just drew a blank. So if I understood that question right, as far as Frontiers, were you asking why I decided to do record deals?
Well, what I'm saying is that it's been a 6-year span since your last record. And, in your mind, I'm trying to find out where your thought process was between the last record and this record. Because, we do quite a few interviews here on the Classic Metal Show, and we speak to a lot of artists. And, being the music business is what it is today, which is pretty much non-existent, and everybody's into downloading and whatnot. A lot of artists are saying, why bother?
Yeah. Well, I can kind of tell you what happened. I mean, we did Wicked Maiden. It was a record we only released in Europe and Japan. And we had, quite a bit of success, shot a couple videos for it. We did some touring. I think the last show we did the Sweden Rock Festival with us. And it was really cool, too, because I'll never forget the last show on that tour. We did, we were on the headlining show. It was really cool because we didn't do a lot of touring in Europe. And the festival owner for Sweden Rock Festival goes, Chris, I want to put you on the headlining stage. So you're going to be on with Black Sabbath. But they were going under the name Heaven and Hell because it was with Ronnie. Right. And so it was Heaven and Hell, Dream Theater, Journey, and Impellitteri. And we were like, it was a great show, too. It played for like 35,000 people. Amazing response. It was just really good, great energy coming off that. So I came back to LA and we started writing. And, I was really getting ramped up to start to think about how we were going to attack this new record, what we wanted to sound like, blah, blah, blah. And then I get a call from Sony Music in Japan and a management company who were representing bands like Nickelback, and they were managing at the time Steven Tyler of Aerosmith. And they said, Chris, we're putting together this band. And at the time, I didn't know what it was. And they basically said, we're calling it kind of this super group, but it's not what you think. So I said, well, first of all, who is it? What kind of music? And he goes, well, it's metal, but hold your thoughts. And he goes, it's going to be, there's a drummer named Scott Travis from Judas Priest. And I went, I know Scott. And Rudy Sarzo and this guy Mike Viscera from Loudness, or used to be in the band Loudness. And he goes, what they're doing is they're going to be doing remakes or kind of bastardizing famous anime music and turning it into heavy metal. And they need someone to shred, and they've chosen you. And I was like, well, when I saw the concept, like, I don't know about this. But ultimately, I talked to Rudy and the other guys, and I agreed to do it. And like, this would be cool. It's an honor. It's our way of thanking everybody in Japan, because anime is a huge part of their daily life. And so I did it thinking it was going to be 6 months, right? And this is 2000, I don't know, 10, 11, whatever. And so we do the record, and then we go do a tour, and we end up doing, like an arena tour, and the record goes right to #1. Then the label goes, we want another one, and we want you to go back and do this again, another full tour cycle. Before I knew it, we'd already spent 3.5 or 4 years, and that's really where I was at all this time. And I wasn't thinking about, is the record industry dead? I mean, because to be honest, we were getting paid an obscene amount of money to do it.
Sure.
The shows were great. I mean, the first show we did was 18,000 people. And it was really quite a successful adventure. Now, a lot of metal kids, I'm not sure they're digging it, because, again, once you hear what it is about, you have to really be into anime. Right? We're basically taking famous anime music, and then we're crossing it with, like, one song called Cat's Eye. It's literally the Mob Rules riff by Black Sabbath. And, they sing the lyric over that. And it's got a big production. They allow me to shred. And so it's really interesting stuff. So anyways, that's where I was. And I wasn't thinking, well, is the industry dead? No one's supporting this. No one makes money anymore, because, we were going right to #1 with that project, at least in those markets.
Right.
And we were playing very big places, and we were being compensated very well. So it was never a thought of, is the industry dead? And when I came back, I was ready to go. So I just wanted to start writing music, and I went in, I've got a studio in my house, and I started writing, and then I get a call from our label in Japan, which is JVC Victor, and they said, hey, we want another record. And I had options with them, and I said, well, let me think about it. I'll talk to the band guys. We already knew we were going to do it. So we agreed to do it, and we weren't thinking yet really about what we're going to do outside. And then I was being approached by European metal labels saying, hey, dude, we want this. You're building this. I don't know what's happening. Your band seems to be, when you should be dying, you seem to be getting bigger, if that makes sense.
Right.
And they said, there's a lot of interest in you guys. Would you do this? And so we did some songs, sent it to everybody, and virtually every rock label or heavy metal label, whatever, in Europe offered us a record deal. So, that, and again, and there was money there too. So, but it wasn't about money, to be honest, for us. It was really about who was going to give us the most attention and really be passionate about our music, And so some friends of mine said, hey, look, why don't you talk with the Frontiers guys? Serafino's awesome. He just signed like Whitesnake and Journey, and, he's got some other bands, and they're really passionate about what you're doing. So talked with him, sent him some music. He really dug it. And, we never thought about, okay, are we going to sell 1 million records? Or are we going to make, $10 million? It was never about that. We had already done so well in Japan financially. It just wasn't about that anymore.
Right.
It's about being passionate about what we do. So even if we're doing it for free, who cares?
Sure, absolutely. Well, do you find it kind of disheartening that, in order for, a guy of your caliber and your style, you have to go out of the country to be successful? Because, the music scene in the U.S., there is no real promotion. There is no real, outlet for this kind of, for your style of music. You won't hear it on FM radio, and you might hear it on internet radio, and maybe you might hear it on a satellite station, but for the most part, it seems like the fans are either in Europe or Japan.
Yeah, well, you definitely have hardcore kids that love hard rock and metal in the United States as well, but they end up becoming more like, bands like Iron Maiden. That's probably a great example. I love Maiden, one of my favorite all-time metal bands. Whether you want to call Maiden hard rock or metal is irrelevant, but if you really look at Maiden from a commercial success, do you ever hear Maiden on the radio?
Never.
Exactly.
And they sell out arenas. They played here in the Chicago area with little to no promotion, and it was sold out to the rafters.
You got it. And that's what we want to be. That's where we're trying to take this. We would love to be the next Maiden, if that's possible. Who knows? Maybe it's not. Maybe it is. But the reality is, that's why I don't think the market is dead. I mean, we have so many kids that are so passionate about the music we do, or the bands like we're talking right now that are more of the, they're much older and much more established, far more successful, but they're really passionate and they love that music, and it kind of tells you reality. Yes, they're not played on radio. For God's sakes, I live outside of Malibu, California, And, basically they have big rock radio stations here, a lot of classical rock. And most of the stuff is like, it's, at very best, you're probably going to hear Van Halen, Led Zeppelin, stuff like that. But you never hear Iron Maiden.
No, absolutely.
Occasionally you hear Judas Priest, but it's going to be the poppier side of Priest,
Sure. Well, speaking of all those legendary hard rock metal bands, the Godfathers, if you will, the unfortunate thing about life is that we all age, and these bands are getting aged, be it AC/DC, Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, Black Sabbath. These arena bands are not going to be around forever. And who do you see taking their place as an arena act? I mean, obviously hard rock and metal is going to always be around on some level, but it'll never be to the bombastic arena size level that those bands took it to. Do you think that could ever be a possibility in the future?
Actually, yeah, I do. I think now there's been a lot of there's been a lot of debate recently. Wasn't it Gene Simmons had something, everybody was jumping all over a couple months back where he was saying rock is finally dead. To that effect, the reality is, rock music is never going to die. It's part of, it's part of youth. There's something exciting, inherently exciting about it. It has a true intrinsic value to it, but we have to face reality that media is controlled, right? And usually the people controlling media a lot of times, they're maybe the people that are the very well-educated, metal is an annoyance to them. It's a hindrance. It's a nuisance. They'd rather hear dance music at a party or a club. But it doesn't mean there aren't millions of kids out there that still don't love it and embrace it. It's going to just take a change. It will take someone like I'll throw out an example, maybe like a Mark Zuckerberg, someone who has very deep pockets that buys an MTV and says, screw this, I'm going to start playing metal again. I'm going to buy up some of the, the larger radio stations across the country, like Kiss FM or whatever, right?
Right.
And it's only a matter of time until someone like that takes the reins. And if the bands are out there, and hopefully they're going to be newer bands, right? Because I do know, and listen, I have a lot of friends that are these major bands, the Priests of the world and the Maidens and all that. And listen, to be fair, I mean, we all know reality is coming. How much longer can Kiss, and I like Kiss, I have tremendous respect for Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons, I really do. But the reality is, how old is Gene? Is he like 66 or 67 years old?
Yeah, he's in his mid-60s.
Right. How much longer can he put 7-inch platform boots on there and, put on their costumes and go up there and rock in front of an audience?
Right.
And travel. People don't realize when you're touring, that takes a toll on you.
Sure.
So eventually, and it's sooner than later, that's going to end. Unless they, of course, as they talk about, replace them with young kids or some weird thing, right?
Right.
But you got them. Then you got Judas Priest, and I love Judas Priest. Great band. But, what's Glenn Tipton? 66 again? 65, 66?
Right.
Rob Halford, is he not 65?
Yeah, he's in his mid-60s as well.
And I hope I hope that they have the ability to go on forever. I really do. But they're getting older. Not older. I mean, they are older. I mean, listen, to be fair, with a lot of without hair color, right? I mean, if you really were to picture how these people would really look, right? Kiss. I mean, seriously, take the wigs off, do all of that stuff, and put them in their age group. How would they look? And you'd probably go, wow, he's like a grandfather.
Right.
And I'm not being insulting. I don't mean it that way.
That's just fact of life. And, and that just goes back to my question, is that era is coming to an end. We all know that probably within the next decade this though, Neely, sorry. I want to interject. What about bands? And this is why I get slammed for saying this, and I really like this band. What about a band like Avenged Sevenfold? Well, are they selling out an arena as a solo act?
Well, they headline download in Europe. They do arenas here in the States.
Well, but as a solo act, they don't have like support acts that kind of make it a package.
As far as I know, no. I mean, I think they are the last band. Now, they've been around for now 12 years, I think, at least, if not even more.
Sure.
So in theory, they're not a new band, and that's the biggest problem. Since that band, there hasn't been a new band that has broken out where they're selling out arenas playing metal. I do really like this new band Volbeat a lot.
Oh, yeah, that's one of our favorites here on the Classic Metal Show.
Great band, absolutely fantastic. And, and it's funny, our drummer, John Detty, he's been playing, on and off, I think, filling in for Charlie Benante from Anthrax. And so he knows the guys, and it was actually John turned me on to Volbeat, and I was like, man, this is fantastic. And he told me Volbeat, I guess, are going out, and they're doing pretty large sheds. I think they're going out. I'm not sure who the tour is, but it's supposedly them. And so, again, that could be a good sign for maybe there's going to be a new generation being able to actually headline arenas and somehow bring life back into this medium.
Right. I agree. Well, it's kind of disheartening for, guys in my age group that, like I said, came up in that era when hard rock and metal was huge and over the top. And, I'd like to see that trend continue, but without the infrastructure of a record label or an MTV or some kind of media outlet that, puts it in the public eye on a consistent basis, it's tough out there. And I know you know that as a musician. I'm not telling you anything you don't know already.
Absolutely. Like I said, for a band like us, people do. I mean, I have so many friends go, man, you guys have been around for so long. How do you survive? How do you do this? And to be honest, listen, we were really lucky, and I say this again, and I don't ever want to sound like an egotistical jerk or whatever, or arrogant. I don't mean it this way. But, again, we've sold, I don't know, it's well over 1 million, probably over 2 million just in Japan, and the tours and all that stuff. So financially, it's given us the freedom to do what we want.
Sure.
And so for here, now we're coming at the American market and the European market. And absolutely, we're up against such resistance, right? It's just the way the world works right now, right? It's like, who are you going to promote your product through, right? There's really no MTV. There is no MTV, for God's sakes.
Yep.
Right? There's really no one playing this. There's no infrastructure. The magazines are dead. All the big stuff when I was a kid, you had all these great magazines like Circus and Cream, and you'd run to the grocery store, the newsstand to get these things to read about Van Halen or whatever the new big thing was. Well, they're pretty much all gone, So, how do you expose it? And to be honest, it becomes hopefully it becomes a very large movement in the underground first. And then from there, like I say, if we get lucky, we get someone that actually, I don't know, somehow takes it under their wing, their umbrella or whatever. And if they're passionate enough and they have the deep pockets, hopefully that's what saves this thing.
Right, absolutely.
Sorry, I'm probably sounding like I'm babbling. I'm going.
No, not at all. I always like to hear the musician side of this because, I'm just a rock fan and, a disc jockey. And it's always good to hear it from the guys who are out there slugging it out in the trenches, as it were. So speaking of that, you got this new release on Frontier Records called Venom. So what's with the simplistic title?
The simplistic title has far more meaning than you would think. I will tell you, well, I guess I'll start basically and tell you what it is. When we did Venom, basically we had a goal. And again, please, when I talk like this, I don't want anybody to construe this as arrogance. As an artist, you always want to challenge yourself, right? You want to basically push yourself to see how far you can take something. And so we wanted to say, hey, as we're acting like little 3-year-olds, we want to make the greatest rock record in history, right? But to do that, it has to be like something we can benchmark and compare other great records. So for me as a kid growing up, I was addicted, and keyword here is addiction, and you're going to get into the title. It was basically like Van Halen 1, Ozzy's Blizzard of Oz, Diary of a Madman, Master of Puppets by Metallica, even the Black Record, right? Love Pantera, Cowboys from Hell, and so on. And so we wanted to make a record that would be addictive to anybody who heard it. It was almost like a poison, Once it got in your blood system, your bloodstream, you'd be obsessed with it. And that was a goal, again, just a goal for us. And so when we did this record, we were trying to make a record, and I'm not kidding, that we thought when we were done with this and we weren't going to finish it or allow it to be released until we believed in our heart that we could easily put this up against those records and think that it could easily rival those. Now that's kind of an arrogant way of thinking about it, but it's, as a human, it's good to have these goals. So when we were doing the title of the record, because of the addiction, we wanted this music, once someone heard it, to basically act as if it was a poison. It was in their bloodstream. They became like a crack addict, junkie, couldn't stop listening to it, right? And so that's the Venom.
Gotcha. Well, and it's a nice tip of the hat to the the music or the great albums that came before you. So I don't think anybody's going to have a problem with that.
Well, yeah, and by the way, and I'm not saying that this record is as good as those records. I said it was our goal, and as a kid, those records had a huge impact on my life. And I was addicted to these things. It was like a snake bit me, right? And I was poisoned, and I was I don't know, I was possessed. And so that's really the whole meaning of Venom. You know, it's kind of our inside. You know, it's almost like an inside joke to us when we were doing it, because really it was our personal, you know, thought,
right?
In our process of making this record, just to challenge ourselves. You know,
sure, absolutely. Well, the new record sounds great, and you can definitely hear the influences in there, especially, you know, since you did, you know, basically start out in the 80s, and you've retained a lot of that hard melodic riffing that fans of classic metal enjoy the most, which obviously is your reputation for doing that. But it's a solid release, and I like the fact that you have John on drums, because, you know, he's drummed for two of my favorite thrash bands, Testament and Slayer.
Absolutely. Great bands.
And, you know, obviously you've worked with Rob Rock before, and you mentioned that you've worked with other singers. Are there any singers out there that you're a big fan of, and you go, you know what, I'd love to work with that guy at least one time, or maybe record a record with, or maybe even a song with? Anybody come to mind that you've never worked with, but you always thought you would like to?
Vocalists?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, of course. I mean, but it's not one. I mean, there are many. I know this is where someone's going to punch me in the head for saying this. You know, one of my favorite bands, and again, I'm known for metal, right, is Journey.
Okay, nothing wrong with that. We got Journey fans listen to this show.
Yeah, love Steve Perry. You know, I would love to do a metal record with that dude. You know, the young Steve Perry. I would love to do that. Just a huge fan of him. But, you know, as far as other singers, you know, I think my favorites they're getting older now. I mean, I would love to do a project with Bruce Dickinson. You know, I really love Bruce. There's something very unique about his voice.
Well, he is a legend in his own right, and he is he is a one of a kind.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's definitely one of my favorite singers. I mean, Rob Rock, absolutely by far. You know, I've worked with a lot of great singers, projects that people don't know I'm on. I actually worked with a lot of very great singers in the late 80s, early 90s, where I was basically just doing sessions for them. And, you know, and I've always had a soft spot on singers that had the ability to sing basically like in a tenor range. You know, I was really a little bit disheartened by the way the vocal style went in the 90s. I mean, I got it. It was fun, the Cookie Monster voice and all that stuff, but I didn't really embrace it, because I felt like after two songs, it didn't take me anywhere. You know, where the guys that could sing like Pavarotti, like this huge, powerful tenor, they could do it all.
Right.
So, and that was the guys. I mean, initially for me, it would be like, you know, Bruce Dickinson, Halford had the ability. I was much too young to understand Deep Purple, but if you listen to them in the day, right, like, you know, Ian Gillan. I actually did work for probably about 3 or 4 months. I did a project with Glenn Hughes, another great guy. He was in Deep Purple, and you know, these guys were amazing. And Ronnie Dio, I loved Ronnie. Mm-hmm. You know, so you can kind of see where my heart is, right?
Right,
as far as these guys, right? Yeah.
Well, there's some very notable guys that seem to churn out a lot of records these days with you know, some of your contemporaries, like a Johnny Gioli. You know, he's got a very recognizable voice, and Jorn Land is a guy who never seems to stop working. He's always out there doing something, you know, and, you know, there's a lot of great vocalists out there, but as we started this conversation with, you definitely got to compliment the music and the vocalists with your playing.
Yeah, and vice versa. I mean, I just think that they have to work together. So I mean, these are, you know, again, we're talking hypothetically, but you know, that's really where my passion is with a singer. So if I were to work with anybody else, you know, first and foremost, at least for the guys that are still around alive, I would love to do a project with Bruce Dickinson. He's probably my first choice.
Absolutely. Well, you could, you know, if you ever get into your Judas Priest vein and you can't tap Rob Halford, you could get a hold of our good friend Tim Ripper Owens. I'm sure he'd be glad to work with you as well.
He's actually very good. He played before us, I think, at that Sweden Rock Festival. And I remember, watching him on the side, before we went on and thinking, yeah, it's, you close your eyes and I'm like, my God, I'm listening to Rob Halford, but, a 29-year-old Rob Halford or whatever,
Right.
I mean, just very, very impressive. But I don't know much about him after that. I mean, I remember him in Priest, really dug the stuff he did. Thought he did a great job in that band.
Well, he does so many projects. I don't think he can keep up with all of them, but
yeah, that's not always a good thing for me. I'm one of those guys where it's like, I feel like when I'm in a band, I want to be kind of like in a marriage. I don't want to be like, hey, mom and dad are cheating on each other and they're in 8 different relationships.
Right. Absolutely. Well, Chris, is there anything specific about this new release, Venom, that you want to point out to the fans? Anything that stands out that maybe you want them to pay attention to?
Well, for us personally, I mean, listen, this record is, I mean, I can tell you right now, we've released it. A lot of the media right now, they're reviewing it and they're getting all of that, and we're getting just great reviews on it right now. But when we made the record, this is an honest record. We wanted to make a metal record. We did it for ourselves. So any song that we thought was a great song, we developed. And then we spent, I don't know how many weeks, hours, whatever, mastering it, rehearsing it as a band. So then when we recorded it, we actually went into NRG, which is a really big studio in LA where like Linkin Park and Slash did their recent records. And we did a lot of stuff live. We wanted to make it feel like the fans are, when they're listening to this music, or whoever, friends, whatever, are listening to this, they're literally on the stage with us playing this. So it's got great energy. And every song kind of takes you through a different time period. Right? It's like Venom, the opening track. It sounds like, man, this is like a new band in 2015.
Right.
It's got the shredding, the screaming, big production. But then listen to a song like We Own the Night. I swear to God, I feel like we ripped off Whitesnake when I hear that song. I'm like, man, that could easily be on the Still of the Night record that John Sykes did with David Coverdale.
Right.
Maybe it has a little bigger production, maybe a little bit more technical playing or something, but I could see it easily fitting on that record. So it's fun. It's really a fun record. I mean, one minute you're in, maybe you're in 2015, the next minute you're in 1987, then you're back in 2005. It's all over the place, but it's fun and it seems to work. If that makes sense.
Well, it does make sense, and I do like the diversity, and I do like the familiarity with this record, and I know the fans who are fans of classic metal, they'll appreciate it and might even pick up on a few of those kind of familiar sounding riffs, So great job on the new record, and congratulations.
Oh, well, thanks. And listen, I hope you enjoy. We just shot 4 music videos. We just released the Venom video. So if you haven't had a chance, check it out. I believe Frontiers have it up on their sites, probably on YouTube. Just titled Venom. It's really fun. And then we've got 3 more videos coming pretty soon.
Excellent. All right, Chris. Well, I tell you what, it's been a real pleasure having you here on the Classic Metal Show. I'm glad we had an opportunity to bring you on for the first time, and hopefully we'll have you on again in the future. Go out and get this new CD. It's due out in the stores here in North America on the 21st of April, and it's out on the 17th in Europe. So go pick that thing up. Anything else, Chris?
No, guys, thank you very much for your time. Thanks for spending time with me. I hope you enjoy the music.
Excellent. All right, Chris. Well, before I let you go, I need to ask you the traditional Classic Metal Show question. We've got over 300 answers to this question, and we ask everybody, how has Lemmy from Motorhead influenced your career?
I think he teaches you the spirit of rock and roll. I think he's influenced be who you are. Continue on that trek and follow your dreams, because that's what Lenny is. He just doesn't seem to follow a trend. He just always seems to be Lemmy. I mean, I could look at him today and still see the same Lemmy as of 25 or 30 years ago. And I think that's so cool.
Excellent. All right, Chris. Well, we appreciate you taking the time to speak to us here on the Classic Metal Show. Again, the new CD is called Venom, and as a tradition, we always have the artist pick a song to take us out of the interview. So what should we play from the new CD, and tell us a quick story about it? Well,
I think, why don't we try Venom, since it's the opening track, if you haven't done that. And Venom, like I say, it's a very energetic, aggressive song. I think it's very traditional Impellitteri, and it's got the band basically pushing the envelope, challenging ourselves as musicians, pushing our human limitations as, artists. And it's a lot of fun. And it's, kind of the style of music we've loved since we were kids.
Excellent. All right. Well, here it is. This is brand new Impellitteri from the Venom release. And this is Venom exclusively here on Your Classic Metal Show.